Welcome to Women Igniting Change, the place to be for women leaders and decision makers who are passionate about changing the world and determined to act. I'm your host, Robbin Jorgensen, former corporate executive, global speaker, and founder and CEO of Women Igniting Change. Let's dive in. Hey, change makers. Welcome back to the Women Igniting Change podcast. Today in the studio, I have Mirna Santiago. She is an attorney, lecturer, and bias buster, which I love that, who is deeply committed to helping underprivileged and underrepresented middle and high school girls learn about the law, the legislature, and the judiciary through her organization, Girls Rule the Law. Mirna, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's dive into your personal journey a little bit. So what inspired you to start Girls Rule the Law in the first place? And how has your personal background influenced your passion for creating those opportunities for these underrepresented youth?
I think for me, being a Black Hispanic woman who was born in another country, I'm a migrant, right? And I came to the United States when I was 6, had to learn English as a third language. It was so hard going to a place where, going from a place where everyone looked like me, sounded like me, lived my lived experience, to coming somewhere where that wasn't the case at all. And then having to sort of navigate the different stratas, if you will, in American culture, because we lived in the South Bronx, we were in the projects, and everyone looked like me, but they didn't have my lived experience. They were African American as opposed to Afro-Latina like myself. And seeing sort of how society treated and treats African Americans, where we lived, in the projects, and then just kind of seeing the different things and realizing that there was no one on me like me on TV, for instance, right, talking about the law. I didn't see any judges that looked like me, lawyers that looked like me, politicians that looked and sounded like me, or even my neighbors. So for me, getting into the law was sort of a fluke. It was just sort of like a wish list that my dad had. He was like, oh, one should become a doctor and the other one should become this and you should become a lawyer. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't realize how hard it was going to be.
Mm.
And so kind of going through that journey and getting to the point in my career where I was like 25 years out. I mean, I didn't start Girls Roll at the beginning. I started it sort of, in the middle of my career, and realizing that, well, there should be something that I can do to make it easier for the girls who kind of had my own experiences so that they're not bumping around in the dark like I was. So that's kind of how I started Girls Roll. That was the idea for it.
I love that. So what personal values or principles guide your leadership in leading this incredible organization?
Collaboration is what it boils down to. Like every idea that we've had for Girls Rule, we have a very small team. We have a team of 4 women, and we have a big reach with just that small, tiny, 100% volunteer team. These are women who have children and full-time jobs, and they still get on every night and do work for Girls Rule. So it's about collaboration. Like I listen to my team. When you sometimes look on our website or if we have events coming on and you see it on LinkedIn or Instagram, that branding, that hot pink with the white, white and blue logo, that's Tanya Davila. That's my events programmer, right? The woman who does the event planning. She's the one who was like, you need a brand. You need, like, when people click on and see Girls Roll, they see that hot pink and blue and they know it's you, right? The lunch and learns that we do. We reach out to all kinds of different women. We've done it at AMC networks. We've done it at Disney. We've done, like so many different things. And that was Kelly, right? The program director. And her full-time job is with New York Road Runners, the people who put on the marathons. And Kelly is like, I have so many contacts in different places. How can we capitalize on that? And I'm like, let's do lunch and learns. All of those places have lawyers, right? Like they have women lawyers in those places. So let's show our girls that it's not just about going to court every day. They may not want to do that. So, that's that. Juana Pacheco, who's the board chair, she's very connected as well. She was the one who got us to DC to see Justice Sonia Sotomayor. People go on our website and there's Sonia Sotomayor. So and if it was just me trying to run the organization, it wouldn't be as successful as it is, because it really is a team effort. It really is about collaboration. And I listen to my ladies. I really trust them, so that when they tell me, this is not going to be successful if we do 3 things in a row, then I have to, sit back and say, okay, then which one of these 3 things should we focus on to make it really
Yep.
successful?
Yeah. So outside of your personal lived experience, can you share a pivotal moment or something that happened that really reinforced your commitment to these young girls?
Well, it was a full circle moment for me. So when I was 22, my dad passed away last year, but my mother still lives in the Bronx. Thank you. So but they lived in the Bronx their entire lives and they had no intention of moving. And at 22, I moved out of the Bronx, out of their home, went to school in Buffalo and never really looked back. I would come back to visit them, but I lived, in Manhattan, then I lived here. And then, like, I don't want to go back to the Bronx. And then I got an offer of a job to work at this huge nonprofit that was based in the middle, like literally 5 blocks from where I used to live,
Of
right?
course it
In the projects. And I was going in, I was driving in every day, and I was feeling so much anxiety, like the traffic and the noise, and it was just stuff that I wasn't used to anymore.
right.
And one day I'm talking to my sister and I tell her, I'm like, I have to do something because I left like almost 30 years ago and the Bronx is exactly the same. The schools are still the same, the conditions are still the same. And I'm like, and the only way that we can create change, and this is me talking to my sister as I'm walking to, to my car in the parking lot, like 4 blocks away. I said, the only way we can effectuate change is if we do it from, if it's organic, if we actually start taking these
Right.
girls who are raised here and born here and teaching them, showing them stuff that is not this. So that's where we're like, DC, Albany, Manhattan, just showing these girls like, hey, this is what your life could be outside of this. But you have to put in some work, right? You have to put in some elbow grease, obviously. You have to have the right network, right? Because as the saying goes, your net worth is dependent on your network. So we are trying to create a network of women that are going to help these young ladies, give them internships and jobs and that sort of thing. And that was really the impetus. It was just like, oh my God, I ran away from this place all these years ago, and it's still exactly the same. And it's not fair to the kids that are still here that people like me do run away, right?
Yeah. Well, I love, first of all, like the universe called you back there clearly. And I love that you want something more for these young women in the Bronx. You want to expand their lens and the way that they see the world to show them that other opportunities exist out there. I love that. So as you were going from your professional career as an attorney and creating Girls Rule the Law, so many of our listeners, they have that idea around social change. They're terrified to put it out there, right? Through fear, the noise in our head, all of that stuff. Sometimes they do it on the side and they still have the job over here. You chose eventually to make the leap. So walk us through what some of those challenges and obstacles were in making that transition and how you overcame those.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of noise. And there was a lot of noise from everybody. Like my mother still says, so who's paying you for this? Like, how are you, how are you going to get paid? Like you need to go back and get a job. I have a 20-year-old son who like calls me weekly and it, says, have you applied for a full-time job yet? So there's a lot of noise and people just
Right.
don't see the value of it. I have friends who'll say, well, why don't you do this after you retire? This is not, obviously you're not getting rich off of this. And I completely understand that, right? I know that it's coming from a place of concern. But for me, I don't feel that the impetus is going to be there when I retire. It's not going to be there 13, 15 years from now because things are happening now, right? There's rollbacks of our reproductive rights right now. There's rollbacks of other people's freedoms right now, the LGBTQ. So for me, I feel like I need to empower women to speak out now, to be in the places that matter now, and not 15 years from now or
Yeah.
13 years from now when it would be easiest for me to do. It's not always easy to do what's
Right.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. First of all, because you listened to that calling, right? And you didn't turn away from it, which I love. And when that compelling purpose is strong enough, it pulls you through the fear and it pulls you through any obstacles because it can't not happen. Period. Period. So I love that. So tell us, take us into Girls Rule the Law. Tell us about your programs and what you do because you have a multitude of things that you do for these young women. Walk us through some of those.
So we do so many different things. We go into the schools, right? So there's a school that I've been working with since our inception 6 years ago in the Bronx, and we've done debate programs for them, created debate programs for them. We create mock trial programs for them, and now we finally got into their budget. Like we've done so much work for them that they actually reached out to us this year, and they'll say, they said in the fall we're actually going to pay you for this for this work, and my team rejoiced. So, there's that. So we do debate, we do mock trial. This past year was our inaugural citywide mock trial program with the Department for Youth and Community Development. So we had 7th through 10th graders doing that, and they just competed at the Appellate Division First Department. We do resume writing. We also, we invite women lawyers, judges, legislators into certain spaces and help women, help the young ladies with their resumes, interviewing skills. We do speed mentoring. So where we try to expose maybe 100 girls at a time to about 100 women, right? And it's
Wow.
literally exactly the same way like you do speed dating, speed
Yeah.
mentoring, and they're just 10, 15 minutes asking them questions like, how do I do this and where do I go to that, and where, how can I get a mentor? We did that at the courthouse in the Bronx. We did the resume writing at the Appellate Division First Department. We've gone up to, we do youth conferences. We had a youth conference at the New York City Bar Center. We've had a youth conference at Fordham Law. We're planning a youth conference right now at Syracuse Law. We do etiquette workshops. We have a program called The Law Suits You, so that any young lady that reaches out to any young person, we don't discriminate, that reaches out to us and says, I need clothing for an interview or an internship or a first job, because I know I didn't have access to professional wear. I didn't have money like that. We will get women, lawyer, judges, any women really who want to sponsor them. And we will get them professional wear to make sure that they have that. That was one of the things we did with our mock trial. We had women lawyers doing suit drives in their law firms, and we dressed every single one of our scholars for
That's
mock
amazing.
trial. I was very proud of myself for that. We just do so many different things. We go to last year we did Albany. We did a tour of the Capitol.
Mhm.
We sat down with then Assemblywoman Latoya Joyner, Assembly Member Catalina Cruz, Court of Appeals Judge Jenny Rivera is a big ally and champion of ours. So we just try to expose these young ladies to as many powerful women, influential women as possible.
Yeah. So as you see these young women working through a mock trial and doing debates, what do you hear from them? Like, how does their perception not only of our judicial system change, but how does the perception of themselves change? Like, what do you hear them saying?
Well, it's very interesting because, like, the women that work with me are the ones that are telling me, like, they'll say, Did you see how this one has grown? And she wouldn't get up and speak at first. And now she's getting up and she's volunteering and she's saying she's going to be a lawyer. And this one is saying they want to run for office. So it's like very exciting seeing the growth of the young ladies. And some of them just join because it's an after school program. They can't be home because they don't have parents there or whatever. So they're just like, whatever. And then towards the end of it, they're like, I didn't want to be here at the beginning. And now I'm like so excited. I'll see something on the news and I'll start breaking down like the legal arguments for and against it. So it's really like, it's great to see it, and we just laugh and we enjoy them because I feel like we're providing a good service, and I feel like the kids are growing as part of our program, even though they may not see it. Unfortunately, when you have so many noises and voices saying you're not worth anything or this is what you deserve, some of the girls do tend to fall out of the program. So, like, we'll start off with 20 girls. We try to keep them small. And by the end, we'll have maybe 12 or 11 because the other ones feel like, I can't do it. Right. And instead of pushing through it, they'll just go play, track or whatever because they feel like they can't do it or it's too hard for them. But the ones that do actually push through, they just love it. Like, one of the young ladies in our Washington Heights program was telling me when we dressed her, so we did the Law Suits You, and she says that her neighbors were honking at her She was walking through Washington Heights, going home after the competition in her suit. And she was like, my neighbors were honking at me because they were like so proud of me that I look so nice with my suit. And I wanted to cry because it was like, she was so excited and happy. And she was like, I want to dress like this all the time. I was like, yes, that's the
Right.
point, right? Yeah. So it's good to see.
That's amazing. Like you, it's kind of like Dress for Success a little bit, kind of in the same vein. But I think when those young women they put on those suits and they look like the women who they want to become, like it changes their perception of themselves. Like I really can actually be this.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. If you can see it, you can be it.
right.
And we try to, we try to do that. Like I initially when I would go to the schools, I would try to dress down, because I'm like I just want them to see me as one of the
Right.
people they see every day. And they started asking me, they're like, well, is that what you wear to court? I'm like, oh, I'm like, maybe. So, so I started going in suits and they were far more impressed with that. They were like, oh,
Right.
what is that suit? And, so now I wear a suit every time I go teach a class and all of my instructors wear suits, which is really
That's cool. So, how do you measure the impact and the effectiveness of the mock trials, the debates, particularly in terms of increasing diversity and representation in the legal field? So, when they're done with middle school and high school, do you track, if they head into that career, or how do you measure the impact of what you do?
So my program was incepted in 2018, so it's only been 6 years. And
Got
because
it.
we start with middle schoolers, we don't have anyone yet who's gone to
Right.
law school.
Yep.
So we're yeah, so we're still tracking those young ladies. One my intern this past spring was a young lady who was in our inaugural mock trial program,
Amazing.
and now she has just graduated from high school and she is going to college to study pre-law. So, at least we have one anecdotal
Right.
sort of evidence that we are inspiring these girls to pursue a career in the law.
Yeah. So, stay tuned.
Yeah. Yeah,
We'll be
exactly.
back on in a
Check
couple of
back.
years. Exactly. Yeah. 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 How do you ensure that the programs that you have, as you mentioned, here in the United States, and we have listeners in 45 countries around the world, but here in the US, we got a lot of stuff going on right now, especially as it relates to women's rights. So, how do you remain responsive to the evolving needs and challenges that these underrepresented youth face? How do you, in the way that you put together the mock trials and the debates, like, how do you do that?
We try to choose programs and topics that are timely.
Okay.
So, for instance, for the debate last year, we did a debate program at an inner city high school. And at the beginning of the debate, I asked the kids, I said, what is on your mind right now? And a lot of them talked about the rollback of abortion rights. They talked about, LGBTQ and the legislature saying you can't get gender affirming care. Like there was stuff that they really wanted to talk about. So we sat down and came up with like maybe 10 topics that we were going to cover throughout those 12 weeks. And they were really excited about that. So you empower them to kind of choose what's important to them. For the inaugural mock trial program that we did with the New York City, I chose the topic for that one because I felt that it was important, and it was about the insular cases. So a lot of people don't know what the insular cases are about, but they're a series of cases that was decided by the United States Supreme Court from 1901 to 1920. And those cases determined up until now, because they're still good law, what rights and benefits the people in the U.S. territories, which includes Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Guam, what rights they're going to have. And what most Americans, especially us who live on the mainland, don't understand is that they have limited rights. Like the people we know, of course, that people in the U.S. territories can't vote for federal elections. They don't have a representative in the Senate. But people don't realize that they also don't get federal SSI benefits.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah. So a lot of them come here to the mainland, get benefits, and then try to go back home because it's cheaper.
Right.
And then they lose their benefits. And the only thing that's changed about their circumstances is their zip code, right? It's
Right.
they've changed address, but they're still poor, they're still indigent, they still qualify for those benefits. So we there was a case that was decided last year by the U.S. Supreme Court. It was called Valle Madero, the United States versus Valle Madero. So I stripped it down so the kids could understand it. And I made it a case where they were going to argue. One side was going to be the government, the other side was going to be Valle Madero, but we made it Maria Rosa, so it's easy to pronounce. And they were going to argue whether these insular cases should still be good law. All these years later is 120 years later, and we're still. And then the insular cases were like very racist. They said that the people in the U.S. territories were from alien tribes and savage races, and that's why they shouldn't get these benefits. And to see the kids sort of dig into it and say, well, if we changed everything else and we have the Civil Rights Act that was passed in 1965, why is this still good law, which is based on sort of the fact that these people are less than, right, like that because they are from these savage tribes and alien races, they shouldn't have rights. And they're like, it boggles the mind that this is still good law. So it was nice to see them kind of work through it. And then also, of course, the government side just kind of arguing that, hey, under the Constitution, a law can be good law even if the basis for it, like what you're saying is the reason for it,
Right.
sucks, right? It can be, yeah, it could be racist. You can say, yeah, these people don't deserve it, but under the Constitution, it's still right because Congress has the right to make laws affecting the territories. So it was nice, kind of, it was good to see them making these arguments and providing the logical steps for it and the legal arguments for it. And it was just wonderful to see.
So many things I want to unpack there. I don't even know where to start. Um,
Yeah.
so, first of all, when I was their age, middle school, high school, I mean, I had like an inkling of what was happening like in the real world, but not really. But nor did I really care in middle school and high school. And I think this generation coming up, just the fact that, first of all, you asked them their opinion and had them feel like it mattered what they thought is brilliant. And the fact that they knew exactly what was happening and they had a passion around digging into a really relevant topic that's happening in our country from 14, 18 years old, that gives me such hope for the world. It's not even funny. So that's one. And two, when they're diving in and unpacking and dissecting the way in which they're approaching whichever side they were on in that case you mentioned, not only are they learning the law, but they're learning strategy, advocacy, critical thinking skills, listening, like all of those skills that are going to serve them when they go back to English class the next day. So like all of those skills are going to serve them throughout their entire world outside of just girls rule the law. That's incredible.
Yeah, and that's really the purpose for it. I think the kids want to feel like they're having fun, even as they're learning,
Yeah.
right? And I think everybody really wants that. So for us, we try to, and then they get up and they start arguing against each other, like, no, but you're wrong in this. And then we have to be like, listen, there are rules. You address the judge, not each other, and all this other stuff, right? And then they start, doing the objections and like this narration and it's this and it's hearsay. And it's so exciting to me to see these kids who walked in and weren't really interested. They were sort of
Right.
apathetic, and now they feel like they have skin in the game, right? And they're going home and they're telling their parents, like the parents showed up. Like a lot of times, like the kids are competing and it doesn't really matter. The parents showed up to see them compete at the appellate division first department. They're looking around and looking at the architecture and everything else. And the parents were coming up to me and saying like, "Oh my God, I didn't know this. I didn't know that the people in the U.S. territories didn't have these rights. I didn't, and it was just, it was good to see that the whole family was kind of growing and learning and getting better as a result of this little program.
That's amazing. So what are some key strategies or initiatives that policymakers and educational institutions can really implement to further support those underrepresented youth pursuing those careers in law and government? What can they do?
Honestly, I think we need a civics-based program, and I know a lot of organizations are working on this. In May, I'm going to be going up to Albany to attend something that's being done by the New York State Bar Association on this. They're really pushing for a statewide civics program. But I think people don't realize, especially people in underprivileged neighborhoods and the kids don't feel like they have a say. They have a voice in the
Mm,
government. Um, and I think when you tell them, voting is giving you a voice in the government,
right.
right? Speaking to your legislator, knowing who that is going to give you a voice in the government. Figuring out like what are those topics, like sitting down and saying, this is what's affecting me, right? Like we in the Bronx don't get as much street cleaning as the people in Manhattan. Why? Right? The funding for the schools look a certain way. Why? And I think it's about asking the questions and taking your legislators to task,
Right.
right?
Right.
We are a non, yeah, we're a nonprofit, so we can't get involved in the politics. We can't lobby, but we can kind of, put the bug in the ear of
Mhm.
the kids and just kind of say, well, now we've taken you to DC, we've taken you to Albany, you've gone to Fordham Law School. What did you notice about those communities versus your community,
Right.
right? And kind of making them aware that way so they can advocate for themselves. And the more people that are actually reaching out to their legislators and saying this is of concern to us in our neighborhoods,
Right.
they can't ignore everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you are a staunch advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do you address or overcome resistance or skepticism from individuals or institutions that are resistant to that change? Because this is another, obviously, as you and I know here, major hot topic here in the US where all of those initiatives are being rolled back and you and I are cringing. So, how do you overcome the resistance that people have around that change? What do you do?
I think it's really about education.
Can you do
So for me, yeah. So for me, I teach a lot on diversity, equity, and
that?
inclusion. I've taught at bar associations and companies and schools. I just teach a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that I always say, because people are, whenever there's a mandatory DEI program, people go in sort of with that chip on their shoulder, like I don't want to be here. Like, why are you forcing me to
Right.
learn
It's a
this
check the
nonsense?
box.
Exactly. So I always start with there's no difference between you and me except where I'm sitting. Right. And they kind of look at me and they're kind of, they're skeptical. And I'll say, let me explain to you what that is. Because bias does not belong to one group of people.
Yep.
It's not only white men who are biased, it's not white women, it's not black. All of us have been, acculturated,
Hmm.
socialized in a way that we have bias,
Right.
right? In fact, if you take the implicit associations test,
Oh,
even yeah, right? Even black people have anti-black bias sometimes.
yeah.
Or white people can have anti-white bias, or women can have misogynistic bias. I mean, there's just so much to unpack. So when I start off that way, then I'll say, and number two is that diversity means all of us, right? Diversity doesn't mean, black, Hispanic, woman from another country. It means all of us. It means that we should all have a seat at the table. And that's what we're here to discuss today, right? And when I address it that way, people are more inclined to listen because I'm not going there as I'm pointing fingers at you or this is your fault or white guilt. Is sort of like how can we make our society better? Right? So that's just the way I've been approaching it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There are places now that just don't even want to do DEI programs, but there are places, thankfully, that are doubling down and saying, no, we need this. This is something that we need to do. So my work has maybe gone down by 2/3 over the past year.
Yeah.
Like whereas before I was speaking 2, 3 times a month,
Hmm.
now I'm down to maybe twice, one time a month if I'm lucky.
Right.
So it's really affecting the internal DEI work of a lot of places.
Yeah. So I love that you brought up the implicit bias test. So we're going to put a link for our listeners. We're going to put a link to that in the show notes. That's something that we use in all of our trainings as well, where they can experience it in real time. And for our listeners, there's, I don't know, Mirna, how many different topics? There's at least 10 to 15 different topics you can
Yes,
choose
a
from.
lot.
Um,
Mhm.
and we do gender for a living, and I bombed that one. So to your point, we all have those internal narratives and unconscious biases, but it's an incredible test to really show you where you are and where you really want to go. So we'll put that in
Mhm.
there as well. Yeah. So
Wonderful. Yeah,
outside of
that's
joining Girls Rule the Law, let me put that as a caveat because that's a given with this next question. Outside of that, what advice would you have for young women who aspire, they want to enter that legal profession, but they face barriers or doubts about their abilities and or their opportunities? What advice would you have for
Mhm.
them?
Well, I talk a lot about acculturation versus assimilation,
Ooh,
right? And
yeah,
that's yeah. Yeah, so That's what we try to do with Girls Roll is we try to acculturate our young ladies. So we're creating a pipeline
Okay.
into the law. So, but in order for you to enter that pipeline, you have to have the right skills.
Right.
You can't assume that because you are a Black Hispanic woman from another country that you are going to get an opportunity, just because you happen to be what you are. That's not going to happen. You may be able to get a foot in the door, but you're not going to be able to stay there if you don't have the skills.
Right.
So we try to give our young ladies those skills. We do the resume writing workshops. We do, the networking workshops. We do the interviewing skills. We do the etiquette. And I've gotten some pushback on the etiquette because someone, and I won't say who, but someone reached out to me and they were like, "Well, are you telling our young ladies that they can't show up as authentically themselves in the workplace? That you're teaching them how to speak a certain way and how to dress." And that's not the point of the etiquette
Mhm.
at all, right? I know for a fact I didn't know what silverware to use. And then I got invited to go to a formal dinner, when I was first a lawyer, and I'm
Right.
sitting there like, oh
What
my
do
God, like what like
Yeah.
what do I do? Yeah. So I want my girls to not have that, oh my God, what do I do
Right.
moment?
Well,
Because you already know. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
You've learned it already. I don't want you to walk into an interview, your first interview, and you're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know, I don't know how to shake somebody's hand or whatever. So it's about acculturation. We're not telling you you can't be yourself. We have the Law Suits You program. We do a dress for success workshop. Like what should you wear? Like, what's going to be more professional? We're not telling you you can't show up, in your jeans, but you're probably not going to get that job if you do, right? And then we tell them, about the Crown Act, that in New York, your hairstyle is protected. So you can you can go to an interview or to a job with your fro or your braids because it's protected under the law. We're not telling you need to straighten your hair. So, so we're trying to do certain things so that our girls have the skills that they need to enter the workplace and be successful in it.
Beautiful. I love that. So, where can our listeners learn more about Girls Rule the Law?
Well, www.girlswiththelaw.org is the best place to start. It's our website, and you'll see all of our programs that we have done and we've put on over the past 6 years. You'll see all of the future programming that we're doing. Like I mentioned, we're doing a youth conference at Syracuse Law School in the fall, and um, New York Court of Appeals Judge Jenny Rivera is going to be our keynote speaker, and just all of these programs. And then when we do our mock trial, we're starting mock trial up again in the fall. We always need instructors. We need people to go in and talk to the girls, teach them, whatever it is. We'll even give
Yep.
you a lesson plan and a PowerPoint. I mean, we hold the instructors' hands because I know everybody's busy. Like I said, we have a 100% volunteer team.
Right.
So we are just constantly going, and we need people. We need bodies.
Okay.
We also need funding, right? We need sponsors. We need to feed the kids when we do the programs. We need transportation when we take them to DC or
Yes.
Albany. Um, we need clothing, right, for the law suits you. So there's money is always important, bodies and money. That's what we need.
Awesome. Awesome. Mirna, thank you so much. This was incredible. For our listeners, we
Thank
will
you.
have Mirna's full lengthy bio, the links that we mentioned, and more info about Girls Rule the Law. And we'll see you back here next time. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to Women Igniting Change. I know creating change matters to you. If you enjoy what we talk about on the show, please take one action today and share it with someone who could benefit from listening. Until next time, keep standing up and speaking out for what matters.